Hey everybody, what's happening? Mike Miller with the Herald Times, columnist Andy Graham, our pal John Blau,
The thinker.
back there, back there playing drums.
He's on the riser. That's right.
That's what we need is a riser.
Yeah, we do. We need a riser. I agree.
So somebody call Fred.
Yeah.
The lighting's all kind of messed up in here too, actually.
I think the light's kind of
It's just
messed up down on the
always
field.
dark.
It is dark.
This
I mean,
is a dark place.
I know they're going
Not figuratively speaking.
No, but I mean,
literally dark place.
At least from the press box, it appears that way. And I'm sure on the field, they can see well, or people would be complaining about it down there, and I haven't heard that. But from this vantage point, it looks very dark. I think it looks dark on television too. But hey,
thankfully we don't get many of these night games, and they just turn the lights out.
and fortunately, Indiana's season brightened up a bit tonight. I think. That
36-22 victory over Florida International.
It was a better performance, probably overall, but certainly by the defense. I think the defense won the game, really.
I agree.
The defense only allowed 8 second-half points. It was the unit that kind of dictated the tone of the second half when it was decision time. And from an Indiana point of view, that's a really good thing. And several players stood out, and John could talk about the guy that we selected as player of the game.
Yeah, player of the game, we said was Nick Mangieri. He obviously had that one fumble that he pounced on in the third quarter, right? That kind of set up a short touchdown drive. Nate Sudfeld with a 1 yard sneak in, or not sneak, it was on an option play. And then in the fourth quarter, obviously sack fumble, and that gets the ball again. And then Mitchell Page with that nice 16-yard
first of his career.
reception.
Yeah, he showed a lot of 1-2 on that play. That was good.
And so, obviously Nick Mangieri was getting a good amount of rush at the times they needed it, and he was obviously very aware in that one fumble he just pounced on. So
I mean, really from the first play of the game, Ralph Green deflected a pass, the very first snap of the game for FIU, I should say, not the first play of the game. And he had another pass broken up later on. He and Darius Latham definitely made their presence felt. Richard Font, after missing some time,
quarter and a half,
because he'd sustained a bit of a head injury last Saturday, and I think his availability was a little up in the air. It turned out he really put his stamp on the game too. He had 4 passes broken up, including a couple that ended FIU drives in the fourth quarter, I think.
Yeah.
And the defense ended up giving up a little bit over 400 yards. But Mike, what was the stat on that in the last?
Yeah, I mean, FIU had 406 yards for the game, but it's a little misleading. Over the final 7 minutes of the fourth quarter, they had 154 yards.
So
some of that coming in.
Right, at garbage time, after Indiana had gone up 2 scores with, once again, the defense making a play. Marcus Oliver getting the quarterback pressure, big 4th and 2. I remember thinking a little bit that, it's basically the equivalent of a 2-point conversion play. Just like we saw last week with the game on the line. This was a 4th and 2 with the game pretty much on the line. Indiana clinging to a 1-touchdown lead. Marcus Oliver gets great quarterback pressure. The guy throws a duck, and Jameel Cook snagged it and took it to the house 96 yards, which tied for 4th all-time as far as longest interception returns for a touchdown. The last one by a Hoosier, who I think is still currently in the NFL.
I don't know if he is Tracy
Porter.
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
For a long time.
I think he lashed on with somebody and got cut, and then I think he lashed on with somebody again. But I don't know. In any case, it's been a while.
2004.
And so, from an Indiana point of view, a much maligned defensive unit, really after halftime, only allowed 8 points, generally dictated the tone of things, gave the offense short fields a lot.
Yeah.
So that the offense, they really set up 20 second half points for Indiana, and that was decisive.
Definitely encouraging, just the 1 week progression that this defense made. Also, this is traditionally, at least in the Kevin Wilson era, not a defense that has really been able to force turnovers. They don't make a lot of turnovers, but they don't really force them either. And tonight, granted the one that Mangieri recovered the fumble, that was kind of an unforced one where dude just
that was
the ball.
that was a read option.
Yeah.
He pulled it out too late. Yeah.
But with the interception and the strip from Mangieri, that's exactly what this defense needs to do. Kevin Wilson talked after the game, and we mentioned this last week. Last week against SIU, up front that push was kind of going sideways, and he wasn't liking that. A little bit better, just the north-south kind of deal this week.
I agree.
The pressure, by and large, was better. It's still room to grow with that, but we talked last week, just the week 1 to week 2 progression. That that you always kind of make your biggest stride week 1, week 2. Certainly was the case this week.
The Indiana defensive line, controlled the line of scrimmage more often than not.
Well, you mentioned the tips from Green and Latham, and we mentioned this all week. Was we go back to last year with the Bowling Green game, where they were just on their heels flat, and a week later they're at Missouri, and first defensive series of the game. Latham's in the backfield bringing down.
Yep.
They
set the tone in the Missouri game. They set the tone again today, and I think that to me it's interesting to see kids who didn't get to play last week for a variety of reasons. Apparently, we seem to be really hungry out there. They were so anxious they kept jumping off sides. Actually, I thought Indiana's offensive line too, and powerful running by Jordan Howard kind of dictated things in the first half as well. It didn't show up on the scoreboard because Indiana settled for field goals too often. But Indiana, had the ball for over twice as long as Florida International did in the first half. So this was really kind of an encouraging game in more than one way, but especially defensively. And you can't read too much into it. It isn't as if I think the Florida International reputedly has a great offense or anything like that. Their defensive unit was reputedly the strength of their team, and I thought their front seven played well. I thought their secondary guys played well, but I think Indiana's offense figured to struggle at times today against a pretty good defense. And so from a Hoosier point of view, it was really good to see Indiana's defense really kind of be the dominant unit on the field in terms of setting the tone when the game was decided. Yeah,
that's exactly what we've been kind of waiting for this defense to do over the last couple seasons, and they certainly did that tonight. I mean, but you mentioned the FIU defense, and I think they probably weren't as great or as good as we probably anticipated. But I was looking at the rush defense and Jordan Howard being one of the biggest matchups to watch, and Howard ended up finishing with 159 yards, and it took him 6.5 quarters to actually get his first negative rush play of the year. So another really impressive game for him.
Yeah, he comes out the front end. I mean, that's it's a very. There were 3 or 4 times tonight where either he or Divine Redding was just a sliver away from taking it to the house, and they were runs that maybe once again Tevin Coleman perhaps takes to the house. But what Howard gives is something that Coleman couldn't always do, especially earlier in his career, which is just moving the pile. I mean, if Indiana faces short yardage situations this year, they're probably better equipped right now to pick it up than they've been in a while. And one of the reasons is Jordan Howard is just a dude. He's a strong runner.
As far as the offense, so the one thing that kind of frustrated a lot of folks and was kind of puzzling at times was this was actually, we talk about the quick strike value offense. I mean, there were pretty 6 drives of 9 players or more.
They got conservative when they cross midfield.
They got past the 30, and then the third down, sometimes second down calls were just. Kevin Wilson actually took the blame for that. Said he admitted as much. Said just got too conservative and took some points off the board, which is frankly what happened. But it was almost a different kind of IU offense. Really, through 2 games, the balance is really intriguing to me. Just the way they've been able. I mean, look, I think there's a misconception that this is a pass-first offense under Kevin Wilson. To some degree, it is, but. At least, we saw hints of it coming last year, but definitely through 2 games this year, we're seeing a lot of balance with Howard and with what they're kind of able to do with Nate Sudfeld.
And they don't line up in classic power formations with blocking backs very often, but they can line 2 tight ends up with this team and with this offensive line and with a big back in Jordan Howard and with a good reserve back in Divine Redding. Just kind of take it to people a little bit. And they're probably going to have to try to do that next week too, because Western Kentucky's going to come in with a high-powered offense, and one of the ways a team like Indiana can play a team, once again, it's a different conference. It's a different style of ball. Indiana should have more bigger bodies to rotate in there. And I think Indiana's going to try and control the ball, keep that offense on the sideline a little bit more. But what they're going to need to do next week, better than they did this week, was make sure that those forays over the 50 turn into points.
You know who we might see next week? Former IU, little if ever used, Anthony Davis. Remember him?
Sure.
Running back. He's now at Western Kentucky. Probably figures to play all out after their guy went down last night or 2 nights ago. But
I can tell you, man, the Hilltoppers are going to come up here meaning business, and they're not going to be intimidated at all. I've seen them play. It's going to be interesting. I mean, it's going to be the most challenging test for Indiana's young secondary for the season to date, no doubt. And it's going to be fascinating to see how they do. It's going to be a big deal. Could be whether or not Chase Dutra's back, for example. But some of the young guys are coming along. I mean, we saw a play. I think FIU's last touchdown, John, wasn't that kind of perhaps a miscommunication between two freshmen as a cornerback and Andre Brown, thinking he had safety help over the top, and Jameel Cook, the safety, not necessarily thinking he was going to have to be there, and the guy just got behind, and he wasn't able to respond in time. We're going to see stuff like that from a young secondary at times. There's a true freshman out there. But, we're also going to see them have to grow up this week, and in a way, they kind of got the last laugh tonight because it was a true freshman, Jameel Cook, taking that interception back 96 yards.
Okay, yeah, and actually, what was actually one of the interesting things Kevin Wilson said after the game? He said he went up to secondary coach Brandon Shelby this week and said, "Look, you guys, you're going to get burned, you're going to get beat. Your guys are young; it's just what happens." But he wants those guys flying around, and by and large, they were doing that for better and for worse. I lost my train of thought where I was going to take that, but
some were great.
I think to kind of wrap things up, it's been 2 games. Uneven and at times unconvincing, but there are 2 wins, and this is kind of what we've been pointing to, where this is the team that can really truly exploit what Indiana lacks in its defense. But to kind of get to this point and do it 2 different ways is kind of encouraging, just to know that there are different avenues that this team can win.
It would have made a huge difference if Indiana had actually lost that game last week, but Indiana did not. They made enough plays. They made a big play at the very end. They made big plays tonight, and a lot of times it was the defense doing it. And look, you can't, through 2 games, you can't be any better than 2-0. They are, I said in my column, they're 33% to a bowl game, and they got 83% of the season to play. So, I mean, from an Indiana point of view, these were 2 games that people thought they had to win to have the kind of season they want to have. Well, they won them both.
You know what? When we are on the beach writing our game advances for the Rose Bowl, we are going to look back to these last 2 weeks and then just laugh.
Stranger things have happened. Minnesota had one of those magic years a couple of years ago. Jerry Kill's a great coach, and he's brought a really talented veteran staff in there to coach with him. But the Gophers had one of those years where all the close games seemed to break their way, or the big, like there was one in Indiana where Indiana is going to roll in for what looks like the winning touchdown and does a lateral, loses it, and they end up losing the game. I mean, Minnesota had one of those years where all those games kind of swung their way. I mean, we've kind of joked that the karmic wheel of college football owes Indiana several decades worth of good turns. So you never know. Maybe this season's one of those seasons.
It's starting to turn that way. We'll see you guys.